Hi, this is Corey again, and this time I'm with my friend Monivoi. And today we're going to be talking about Judge Kavanaugh. Yes, we could say that now, Judge Kavanaugh, Supreme Court nominee, Judge Kavanaugh. Like he's already been appointed, and all the drama is done with because now he's appointed. But for time, for history, and just for anyone just still wondering like what was all that about, just like spend like just a couple moments actually addressing it, put our time span on how we felt about it, because there's a lot of just yelling on both ends. So quick recap: what happened. Trump nominated Kavanaugh for Supreme Court because as a president, when there's a vacant position, he nominates someone. Then he goes through the House of Representatives, and they do the interviewing process. Now, bear in mind, when he nominated, there was nothing special about him. The group called the Federalist gave Trump a paper of people who are pro-life, and so that's it. He was named many other names. So there is nothing special about this guy compared to 20 other people. So he goes through the process, and in that, people have come up who testified that he has sexually assaulted them. Now, bear in mind, this is for an interview. So for a interview to be the Supreme Court judge, people have come up to say that, hey, this has happened to me, and this is like a huge character issue. Now, when he went through the process of answering the questions, first of all, Ford, who came up, she's one of the many people who said that he has sexually assaulted them. She was poised. She answered the questions, and if you watch the interview, it is very like you just want to feel sorry for her. Like she has definitely gone through a lot. But when you watch Kavanaugh answer, at the very beginning, he first brought that this was a liberal agenda. Now, when it comes to court decisions, like you don't, you address what you're being accused about. You don't say a liberal agenda because then you're flaring, you're flaring up just more tension than dealing to the heart of the issue of you, sir, are being accused of this. And yes, you are innocent to proven guilty, but there's still a due process. Now, bear in mind that this is not a criminal process, this is just an interview. So, Ford and a bunch of other ladies came up and said this has happened. And then again, like, watch the interview. It is very sad to watch, like, seeing Kavanaugh's response and watching Ford's somber, you know, expressing her experience that happened. Um, so yeah, so went through that, and Donald Trump said that he's going to have the FBI look at it. If you look on how the FBI looked on it, they barely looked at it. They didn't ask Ford. They didn't interview Kavanaugh. They did ask a couple other people, but there was no due process. And bear in mind, this is an interview. And how I like to compare it to for my Christian readers is imagine you're in a church and there's a open spot for someone being a pastor. And so you have these multiple pastors who are coming to interview. And then one of those pastors came up and he looks credible, but once he came up, even 30 years down the line, so like multiple ladies come up and they go, "Hey, he has done A, B, and C to me." Like right then and there, like you wouldn't hire him as your pastor. Like especially if he goes on to defend himself saying this is a liberal agenda. Like there's something not right there. And so yeah, so all this is past history. Um, and yeah, so there's multiple reasons why this experience though has shown that ladies who have experienced trauma, you asked like why didn't they come up 30 years ago when it happened? And I think like ladies, there's multiple ladies who have experienced something happen to them, and them bringing it up in their voice not being heard. And this is actually, if you look at the data, this is the general repetition of pattern. And so Ford was brave even 30 years after bringing it up, even though her voice got pushed under the rug, and has shown like a loss for people who have experienced trauma. But I'm with my friend Monivoi, and I'm going to ask her a couple questions. My first question is, again, she's being really raw here, like moment her voice wasn't heard.
Um,
And actually, before that, do you have like any other thoughts about what I said about Ford, Kavanaugh, Trump, the House of Representatives?
I think you touched on the FBI and the whole case, but it wasn't they label it a case, but it wasn't really a case. Whereas if it was something that would be deemed more serious, it would have taken weeks for them to gather evidence and process and interview. And after like 3 days, I think it was 3 days, they said that there was insufficient evidence to continue with the investigation, and so they dropped it.
Which sounds ridiculous, right?
It's
Like,
absolutely ridiculous. It is a serious issue. It is, but unfortunately, it is the truth about sexual assault. Is that oftentimes, when these cases are brought to light, they just kind of disappear, and it's not treated as a serious crime, and it is. It's absolutely a serious crime.
And like especially if someone's in power, right? They have influence in government.
Yeah, and I think like we see a lot of women that come forward about sexual assault, and we see the way that they're treated. But it's not something that just happens to women. It's something that happens to men as well. But we rarely see men come forward because of the stigma and the shame and the guilt that would bring. And as you like, I don't know that would be any different. I'm curious actually to know if a case would be treated different if it was a man that came forward as opposed to it being a woman.
Or just imagine if Kavanaugh was a black man, which are, if you look at the statistics, people who are watching, people who are minority, like there's been multiple times where say they watch a video and they're gonna give some, like generally speaking, statistically, they'll give the man who is white benefit of the doubt over someone who is black. It's because and you have to work yourself out. Like this might be angering you, anyone who's watching this, but who generally gets viewed as monsters in our society? And it's going to be people of color. I think there's, on the book Just Mercy, it talks about how if already, like in the interviewing process for a job, if someone is white with a criminal record, it's like dropped down to like, I'll say a really low number. I think like 10% chance. But then person who's black with a criminal background, it's like 1 to 2% chance of it being even looked at.
Well, even more than that, oftentimes if an application asks you how you identify in terms of ethnicity, if someone checks the box that says that they're African American, chances are they don't even get a second look at their application. Whereas if they choose to not disclose their ethnicity, they'll at least get a first interview. But based on appearance, once they arrive, they don't get the second interview.
You know, I want someone, when I talked about this, he brought it up. Well, if you look at the ethnicity trend, then you will have space to judge. But then again, if you make that argument, you're then making the judgment, you're judging someone's character just by the color of skin before even who they are and what they bring. There's another one where they did a study where they sent out resumes and application. Actually, someone who was Hispanic. He sent his resumes to multiple places
Mm-hmm.
and never got looked at. But once he changed his name to a white name,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, like, all these places that denied him were, oh, hello there. We're interested in who you are. I would like to hear you out. And I think his
Mm-hmm.
name was Jose, and he just changed his name to Joe. Like, just take out the S, and all of a sudden, like, he's yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
okay, so rabbit trail moments. So yeah, so
Bring it back.
yeah, there is this constant trend,
Mm-hmm.
and I think as Christians, the empathy model
Mm-hmm.
calls us to hear the story, and Howard, gosh, the People's History, I forget his last name, but he uses this quote, and I think he's quoting someone else, but it's the voice of the marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
What they call for is not always just, but it will be unjust to hear. And so what we need to do is hear the voices and make the best interaction with, like the best to work with that. So due process does happen. And I truly believe for Ford and for the multiple people who come up who said that this has happened to me, due process did not happen. And I like to immediately discredit them based off some sort of left and right agenda. You have lost the empathy model.
Mm-hmm.
You you know there's this actual story in the New Testament where it refers to this widow pleading for a judge for justice. Well, justice was not served to people who have spoken and their voice wasn't heard. So yeah. So anything else you can think you can add?
Um, no, I think you covered everything pretty well. Just looking over my notes, and I don't I don't see anything else that needs to be added. You did a great job of
Oh,
retelling it.
John Oliver, state of form. No.
Yeah, so that was it.
So yeah, where I get a lot of my news sources, by the way, is from the Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
and I also from a lot of the other news coverage. But I find what the Guardian is, they're a nonprofit, and yes, like they say that, and they come with agenda. They are generally left, but they cite all their sources,
Mm-hmm.
and they have bias pieces, but then they actually have news pieces. And so, if you want to look up to what I'm saying, check out the Guardian, and if you want the links, then I could gladly provide the links. But that's again, if someone watches this and wants the proof of the butter. Um, so yeah. So here comes the interview part because exciting and about deep stuff. Man, I should be having more fun interviews than these deep-hearted interviews.
Deep can be fun. It can be fun.
That's true. So yeah, so can you express a moment that your voice wasn't heard?
Yeah. There's a lot, but I think that in particular, I really identify with this case. Um, I myself am a sexual assault survivor.
Hmm.
I have lived through it more times than I care to admit. Um, but I fall into the percentage of women that do not report their assault for this exact reason. Um,
Hmm. So is there like a fear of your voice not, if you do it, nothing's going to happen, and you're putting yourself out there in a place of vulnerability?
I think that with a case like this, you don't see everything that's happened leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the truth of the matter is, when you come forward with something like this, there is like a precursor is the word that I want to use leading up to these events. So there's like a preliminary like interviews and gathering information and whatnot. What we saw is just the trial portion of it.
Yeah.
Um, but when you come forward with information like that, it takes a good chunk of time for them to gather everything that they need. So oftentimes, here's someone who is suffering, who is in pain, who has
Mm-hmm.
been violated, who has survived through an incredible trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and yet instead of nipping it in the bud and, you know, getting people in right away and having discussions,
Yeah.
they prolong the case. So oftentimes you're not in court until, 1 or 2 years after the fact,
Mm.
because you have to get a lawyer, they have to get a lawyer. You go through preliminaries with their lawyer before it goes to court, and vice versa. Um, and for me, I just didn't want to prolong the pain.
Mm.
What had happened had happened. I couldn't justify continuing to live in this almost like kind of like a groundhog day, where every single
Mm.
day I was reliving the same thing because, an email was coming in or a phone call was being placed. I didn't want that to be my life. I wanted it to just be over. Um, but the unfortunate truth is that these cases, for the regular public, for
Mm.
those that are not in these positions of extreme power, they don't have the benefit of getting it over and done with,
Mm.
if that makes sense. And so I never reported it because I didn't want to continue to prolong it. And
Mm.
I also didn't want to sit in a courtroom with another man that wasn't there accusing me and saying, "Are you sure that it really happened? You were intoxicated. Are you sure you didn't ask for it? Are you
Mm.
sure that prior to that you didn't lead him on, or you didn't this, or you didn't that? XYZ, fill in the blank, whatever."
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't justify. I couldn't justify having to put myself through that, my family through that, my loved ones through that, because
Mm.
they would also be affected.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Mm. That's a lot to take in. Um, Thank you for sharing your story and sharing your experience of why not to speak.
Mhm.
Um, and it's sad in general that you have to be put into a place where you have to choose either to speak or not speak.
Mhm.
It's sad that we have a system where that is like it can't be like there can be no humane way to the victim.
Mhm. Well, and I think even beyond that, it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't
Mm.
come through and say this is what happened, if I don't press charges, people judge me and they say, "Well, why didn't you come through? Why didn't you press charges? Why didn't you take this more seriously? Like, now this person is out there, and what if they do it to someone else? Why is that my fault?"
Mm.
Because what we've just witnessed is that even when you do come forward and you do say, "This is something that I lived through and this happened,"
Yeah.
even women that after the fact go to the hospital and have a rape kit done, even when there is
And that process
physical,
is intrusive, correct?
you basically are reliving your assault all over again.
Mm.
Um, they're not gentle, they're not kind. You're lucky if they are. It's
Mm-hmm.
few and far between. Um, but the whole situation in and of itself is invasive. It's degrading, um, and it is kind of like. And I think it's funny that Trump wanted a list of people that were pro-life, because this to me is also like the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, the pro-life or pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are, no matter what you do as a woman, you are constantly told what you should do with your body. So whether it's my decision to have a baby or give a baby up, whether it's to come forward about my rape or
Mm-hmm.
whether it's to stay silent, somebody's always going to have something to say. And
Mm.
I think that's one of like the hardest things. I really I'm extremely empathetic for Ford because I can't imagine 30 years. That's 30 years of trauma, 30
Yeah.
years of emotions, and
And have you watched her interview?
I couldn't
You could.
watch it.
Oh, yeah, because there's that piece. Yeah. Oh man,
It's hard, and I think that
it's sombering.
I can't even imagine. I think that one of the other dangers of that, um, I would say that I'm relatively far along the road of healing from that. I'm in a place now where I can talk about it, and I hope that me sharing my story empowers other people to share theirs and know that there isn't shame and guilt to be carried.
And also be for systems where it doesn't put ladies in vulnerable situations. It's I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Okay. I think, there's this one really powerful video where it's like a lady, like you go through all the pre-steps you have to do for your safety. Like you have to watch what time you go out. And we live in Portland, Oregon, so there's
You can go out at any time of day.
yeah, I mean, Portland, Oregon, I say in comparison to other big cities is pretty safe, but still there is still a fear of life, a fear of there's still at least what I hear there. Being a guy, like I don't experience that fear. I go whatever night. I go out whenever. Like if I want to go get a drink, I just go. But I know, like at least what I hear is as a lady, there's always this constant like I can't go out alone. I can't.
It's true. I've lived in Portland now for 3 years, and um, I've been drugged 3 times. I've been drugged 3 times. The first time I was at a little karaoke bar with some friends, just down the road from the school actually, and
the one on like like near 82nd.
Yeah, it's like just past under the overpass. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. That place is sketch.
That place is sketch. But we just, we wanted to go and have fun. Like it's usually like a really quiet night, but I guess the night that we went, there was a birthday party, and so there was like max capacity. And
you know the only time I've ever been there was just me and my friend.
Really?
Yeah, it's just awkward because you get this like guy with his headphones going, and we're just like, we just want to sit here and have a nice conversation. Here the DJ is just jamming out like the place is like livid.
I can't even imagine. I don't know what it would be like.
But sorry, you're expressing a moment that you have been.
Yeah. Well, we went and it was supposed to be fun, and I was there with 3 of my friends, and
good thing you came with friends.
It's a major blessing.
Yeah.
And I was standing at the bar, and I had ordered a drink. I'd only had 1 drink that night, and I was ordering my second drink, and I'd only had a couple of sips of it. And the next thing you know, I just remember that I was standing at a table by the door, and I remembered this black-figured woman walk by me, grab my arm, and I don't remember what her face looked like. I can't tell you what she was wearing, but she grabbed my arm and she said, "You've been drugged and you need to leave now."
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know how I went from the table to finding my friend. It is but by the grace of God. Whoever this woman was, I believe, is an angel.
Yeah.
And by the time I got outside, there was all this chaos. But by the time I got outside, the cops had already been called.
Oh my gosh.
And they said that they weren't going to take me to the hospital because if I had been drugged, which they believed that I had, then it just needed time to run its course. All they were going to do was pump me with IV fluid to help the drug run its course. And I was thinking,
good thing they were not like, oh, it's fine, and turned out to be poison.
Right. That would have been.
I mean, I won't be talking to you right now.
No, this is true.
Yeah, don't go to the hospital. You're fine.
But even in that,
yeah.
They weren't very sensitive. And they were this male figure.
Yeah.
And I remember vaguely saying, like, I can't go to the hospital because I'm an international student. I was saying, I can't go, I can't afford it. And he was so insensitive and just like, well, whatever, just go home. Here's the card. If you need anything, like, whatever. And yeah, like you can't, like, as a woman in Portland, like this is the number one in North America, the number one hub for sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And what the cop had said to one of my friends, and she told me the next day, was that he believes that somebody had drugged me to take me. And I was like mind boggled.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, the table that I was standing at was right by the door.
Mm-hmm.
And all somebody would have had to do was put their arm around me and say, oh, like, sweetie, do you need to get some air? Take me outside and throw me in a car. And nobody would have known. No one would have been the wiser.
Yeah.
Like, things like that happen so quickly.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't just happen to women. It does happen to men too. But
Yeah.
that night, I looked like I was there alone because my friends were kind of doing their own thing and making friends with people that were there at the birthday party.
Mm.
So if you don't look like you're with people, then you're absolutely 100% a target, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
That's really terrifying. So
Whew. Well,
I got stories for days.
yeah. Oh, wait, Biag.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and just like to address the people. And you could also, if you have anything you want to say to the people. First, Mr. President, if I have the honor of you watching this, understand that as Christians, we follow an empathy model. And you ascribe to being a Christian. So we first love Christ with everything, then we love people with everything. And it's positive. So imagine if this has happened to you. Imagine a sense of justice you need. Just take this, imagine, like, that's what we do. That's how we care for people. That's how we love people. That's who we are. And if you have any definition of Christian outside of that, you're not Christian. But any sense of the model. You might have some sort of idea of moral rights. I'll say you're more Republican than Christian if you don't follow the empathy model. But we got to speak out of this. We got to, like, this is what being Christian is all about. It's loving Christ and loving people. And hearing these stories, you just gotta always call for due process. Kavanaugh, like, was a bad choice. You screwed the pooch, my friend.
Yep.
The Federalists gave you a list of people. You could have been like, either had the FBI literally go through due process. So again, it's just an interview. So it's an interview. Again, if this was your pastor, you'd be like, out, another pastor. But you seriously, anyone else on that list? Anyone else? But yeah, and people watching this, as Christians, we call out people who claim to be Christians through the scripture, by our source, by our foundation, and that's what I'm doing. And we bring people along so you understand that these are real life stories, real life examples. The left agenda, if there is, okay, but when it comes to stories and hearing people's stories and wanting justice for that, it's a good thing to have. And any Republicans who hold to a Christian model, you gotta work that out. If you say agenda before empathy model, then you got your foundations wrong. We start with empathy model first, then we bring that into politics, empathy into politics, not politics into empathy. So yeah, that's my little piece. Do you have anything to say to Trump or the crowd?
Not so much to the president because I'm Canadian and we don't have presidents. So, yay to Justin Trudeau. But my address would be to the people. You're loved. Your voice matters. Your story is important.
Yeah.
I believe you. I believe you. I believe you. I believe you. And it's not the end. It's not the end. And you're stronger than you know. If I can live through it, you can live through it, you can get through it. Seek out help, talk to people about it.
Yeah.
The more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And the talking about it helps in the healing.
Yeah.
But if anything, just know that at least this person and this person, that we believe you.
Yeah.
We believe you, and you don't have to justify or explain.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Like, and we go to Warner Pacific University. Is a place where if you come with who you are, we'll love you and hear you. Yeah. All right. Have a good day, people.
Deuces.